This is Arts Alive. I'm Lynda Philippi. My guest is Arnie Hollander. Arnie is a volunteer with Architects in the School program and is here to talk about some of the recent projects that he's worked on. So welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, you want to talk a little bit about the program and just describe what it's about for the viewers?
Sure. The Architect in Schools program is part of the Architecture Foundation. It's been in existence 44 years.
Wow.
For the intended purpose of educating the public about the importance of design, both built environment and natural. And 44 years ago when they started, they decided to focus on educating students, meaning 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And so this last year, they placed 90 some architects and engineers and landscape architects in schools throughout the state of Oregon.
Wow.
And touched 2,700 kids' lives.
That's amazing.
So it's a great program.
And how did you personally get involved as a volunteer?
Well, I've always been interested in teaching, and obviously with my background in architecture and design, figured this was a nice mix of the two of them. And so I asked about participating, and they aligned me with one of the teachers locally here. So we began to team up to present a program to help the kids understand design here at McMinnville.
You know, I love that age, those 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. They're so cute. You know, they're not babies, but they're not so grown up that it's just too cool, you know.
Exactly.
And they're, like you were saying earlier, little sponges.
Yeah.
You know, then they're, I mean, igniting maybe perhaps a passion for design or architecture that they hadn't known anything about.
Yeah, that's the excitement, to introduce them to something they've never experienced, and then to find them just really get excited by it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to talk a little bit maybe about, well, you know, let's just go to the slides that you brought, and we'll kind of talk, you can talk us through the slides, and you can talk about, you know, your philosophy and all that as we go through. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, so maybe we could start the slides. There we go.
One of the things that we started off with the teacher teaming up, the 5th grade class was reading a book about a father and a son who built a cabin in the far woods. And so the notion of using a cabin as a theme became what I wanted to work with.
Sure.
So I taught him how to print like an architect, and then I drew plans for a cabin based on what I thought the cabin might be like. And then they had to draw the plans themselves. And then the teacher's husband made the logs, like are shown here on the photograph, and then they had to assemble the cabin working in teams using the plans as the basis for it. And once they did that, they had to then decorate the outside landscaping and the inside based on what they read in the storybook.
Okay.
So it pulled what they were reading as part of their school projects into really understanding architecture.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, we got another one.
Yeah.
So one of the other classes was doing work with plantations. And so instead of doing cabins, we used the same design, and each of the groups then took one of the cabins, and this was a smokehouse. So they very creatively showed how the meat might be hung in this building and smoked.
Okay.
This was Plantation Mansion. What I gave them was a sheet of white background with design of the main part of the building there, and ran some wires off the top of it so they could hang something. And so they took that, expanded the building, created steps, added the roof to it, used the wires to be clouds, to hang clouds from them, and then added their creativity to the landscape and the colors. So they got very excited by doing that.
See the whole project come together.
Yeah. Let's see. So after the first 3 years that I did this, the state of Oregon changed its way of doing teaching. So they have the Common Core curriculum that McMinnville adopted. And so to do just straight architecture was going to be difficult within that program. So working with one of the 5th grade teachers, she came up with the idea of let's have the kids design a muddy water filter system.
Oh.
And so what we did is we gave the kids materials they might find on a camp out if they got lost. So like a t-shirt, plastic cup, charcoal, and so forth. And the Common Core curriculum requires them to design something. So I taught them the design process.
Wow.
With, starting off with constraints, and then you have your limitations of materials, and then you have to come up with alternatives, and then you select one. So in this case, they selected a design, and then we gave them the materials, which all had values to them. So the greener it was, the less the value. And so we rated them on how much expense there was in materials, but also how fast the muddy water went through their filters and how clean it was. And they then had to make a presentation, just graphically as well as verbally, another part of the curriculum. So they had to test it out. And once they tested it, then they had to go redefine what worked and didn't work, and came back with a new design, which we then did as a juried event. So they had to do a presentation in front of a juror.
That's really a sophisticated project.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Super excited by it. So this is the graphic presentation one of the classes, one of the teams came up with, describing the initial idea and then how it progressed from idea 2 and 3, and then the final design. So that the idea is to give them the ability to think new ideas, not necessarily learn facts. And so, and to work together in teams. Which
is really the whole point of education is, working together to solve problems and think of creative solutions for the issues that we have. That's what education should be about, right?
Yep, so these are types of skills they'll be able to use later on in life.
For sure, wow.
And so the last thing we did this last year, wanted to do something a little more creative, and I'd been to New Zealand about a year ago, and stumbled upon the Wearable Art Museum, which sponsors an international contest for fashion designers to make costumes out of all kind of shells and leather and car parts and stuff. So I thought, well, maybe we could come up with parts for them to make a piece of wearable art. And so I went to Freeland Wade here in McMinnville, and they gave us tubing, and Boersma gave us fabric, and the cafeteria at the school gave them milk cartons, and Fastenal gave us metal pieces, and Monica Stetzel Phillips, who you've spoken to recently, gave us some yarn that she used. And so they had to incorporate all of those types of materials into an object that they had to then, same way, design it, log it down in a journal, test how to do it, fabricate it, refine it, and then ultimately they had to make a presentation again to 2 jurors describing what the process was they went through, as well as describe the art piece that they came up with. So that one young man came up, used the plastic tubing as a substructure for the hat, and then put fabric over it. He had to learn how to sew.
That's incredible. Yeah.
So yeah, that was a very exciting project.
So when you're doing this, I mean, what's the most surprising thing to you in any given from year to year to year? What do you like about it? What surprises you?
Well, what surprises me is the enthusiasm of the kids and how they get involved in the project and really learn from it. What surprised me more than not is how we've been able to reach kids that typically were difficult to reach in the classroom on an academic basis. But when they began to think about design or using their hands in fabricating, one boy had attention deficit disorder, and I was told would be disruptive. But he got so excited by doing the little projects that we did. And I brought some antique tools in, for example, show him how you might be able to use these to fabricate the cabin. And he understood how those tools worked. He'd never seen them before, but he just had this intuitive approach to it. And so got really excited about doing the projects.
I think that's one of the things that's really important is, to try to reach kids, because not everybody is an academic, but everybody's valuable. And, I personally probably could have looked at that pile of muddy water stuff all day and never been able to figure it out, and some 3rd grader would have done it. But, everybody's different, and so because we all have different skills, the idea that you can approach learning from a lot of different ways, a lot of different angles, I think that's so incredible, really.
Yeah.
What a valuable program.
Yeah, no, and it teaches the kids not only about design, but I tell them about the design process. If you're going to design a building, it's the same process you go through if you're going to design a new medicine or you're going to design a cupcake. You have to think about the constraints you have to work with, you have to come up with alternatives, and then you have to test them. And so the kids just get a hold of that, so hopefully they'll follow that through as they get older.
That's really amazing. So you plan to continue this, I'm assuming.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah, it's one of the highlights of my year because it's infectious to see the kids get excited and learn from it.
And does this happen all over the country or just all over our state?
It started out nationally, but Oregon's one of the few states that continues to operate the program. And the focus has been the Portland metro area, but it's now expanded statewide. And so this year, reached 2,700 students.
Wow, that's really amazing.
And the people that participate are retired designers such as myself, or young, students at University of Oregon, that get involved with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. And each professional works with the teacher on a team basis to come up with the program. So what I've done here is very different than other people would do throughout the state. So,
Well, and part of it, as you say too, is if you're trying to work with, the core curriculum or whatever,
yep.
and the different kinds of things that you do.
Right, and McMinnville's ahead of the curve on using the core curriculum requirements, but the rest of the state's going to have to follow in line, and they're going to have to be a little bit more specific about that design process.
Yeah, so there's no particular criteria from the foundation except that it is a design project.
Correct.
Then it's left up to the individual, such as yourself, what you actually wind up doing.
Right, right.
Okay.
And all the projects at the end of, it's usually done in March and April, are able to go on display up in Portland. And they usually have 4 or 5 locations where the projects are put on display.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So we've done that a couple times from down here.
Yeah.
But this is quite a trip for a lot of the parents to go up and see.
Sure.
But those projects do get a public exposure.
Oh, that's really incredible. Now, I'm assuming that it's all volunteer.
Totally,
Everything about this program is volunteer.
totally.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really amazing.
Yeah. So the architects, like materials that we use on the 2 big last projects, the filtration project and the wearable art, collected, from volunteer businesses in the community, and then, brought that together, for the students to then use.
It's kind of interesting listening to you talk because, I guess I have the sense that the old-fashioned, architecture or design was, the pencil and paper and all that sort of thing, and maybe modeling in a workshop or something. And now I'm thinking, oh, everything's done on the computer, and you just flick a button here and there. That's really not true at all.
Well, a lot of design work gets done on a computer, but a lot of architecture isn't design. And the process that the diversity that architects go through in terms of their work could be from a librarian in an architect's office to a construction manager, which I was, to manage the actual building of the project, to doing the design. And the design process starts usually sort of by hand, coming in with concepts. So the younger people that are starting out now, they tend to do everything with the computer.
It would be interesting to find out from 44 years ago if anybody who was a student then actually chose a career in design or architecture.
It would be.
Yeah.
Well, I've asked the kids, how many you think might go into architecture or use architecture in their work? And probably half the class.
Of course.
Because you could be a contractor or a painter or
Anything.
fashion designer or lighting designer, same skills.
Of course.
So they go, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. What a wonderful program. Well, Arnie, thanks very much for being here today. I appreciate that. I didn't know anything about this program. I think it's really amazing, and you're doing wonderful work. So thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.